Your father owes us $700,000 for this lake.
This is our land. Back off.
You'll regret this, Thompson.
The lake that changed everything. It was a crisp March morning when my father, Henry Thompson, called me, his voice trembling in a way that made my stomach drop. At 82, he was still sharp as a tack, so hearing him rattled was enough to stop me cold. "James," he said, pausing to steady his breath, "they're demanding $700,000. I laughed at first, thinking it was a mistake. Who demands that kind of money from a retiree living on a quiet lake in rural Michigan? But as he read me the letter that had arrived in his mailbox, my amusement turned to fury. This wasn't a mix-up. This was a calculated attack on my family. The letter came from the Crystal Pines Homeowners Association, claiming my father owed them for lake management fees. The breakdown was outrageous. $200,000 for landscaping, $150,000 for tourism safety, and get this $350,000 for marketing a resort hotel. A hotel my father had never set foot in, never agreed to support, and didn't even know existed. The kicker? They claimed this hotel, a sprawling luxury resort, was built around our lake. A lake our family had owned for generations, passed down from my great-grandfather in the 1970s. How do you bill someone for a business built on their land? That question would haunt me for months, unraveling a truth I never could have imagined. Growing up, Crystal Lake was our sanctuary. Every summer, I'd spend weeks at my father's cabin, fishing off the rickety dock, swimming in the clear water, and listening to Dad's stories by the fire pit. It was a slice of paradise, tucked away in what had become Crystal Pines, a high-end resort community. I always thought we owned just the lake and maybe an acre or two around it. Dad was vague about the details, saying things like, "Your great-grandpa left us this lake, James. It's ours to enjoy." I never questioned it. Why would I? It was just our little piece of heaven. Or so I thought. The HOA's letter changed everything. It wasn't just the absurd $700,000 demand that set my blood boiling. It was the attached contract, supposedly signed by my father in 2019, agreeing to contribute to lake management for tourism purposes. When I asked him about it, he was adamant. "James, I swear I never signed anything like that. Maybe they slipped me something during the construction years back, but I'd never agree to pay for their hotel nonsense." I believed him. My father wasn't the type to forget signing away a fortune. This reeked of fraud, and I wasn't about to let some greedy HOA bully my elderly father. I drove to Crystal Pines that weekend, determined to confront the HOA. The transformation of the area left me stunned. What used to be a quiet lakeside community was now a glittering resort complex, complete with a five-star hotel, a marina packed with yachts, a floating restaurant, and a spa where people in plush robes sipped champagne. It was like stepping into a different world. My neighbor, Tom Bradley, had warned me the night before. "James, they're obsessed with your lake," he'd said. "Every HOA meeting, it's all about how it's the heart of the resort. They act like it's theirs." I figured they were inflating the lake's importance to justify their fees. But the more I saw, the angrier I got. They were raking in millions from wealthy tourists and still trying to squeeze my father for lake dues. It felt like pure greed. At the HOA office, a sleek building that probably cost more than my house, I met Margaret Lawson, the HOA president. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "You must be Henry Thompson's son," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "It's about time your family took responsibility for the lake." Responsibility? For what? Paying for her hotel's marketing? I laid into her, keeping my voice as calm as I could. "This is my father's private lake. He doesn't owe you a dime." Margaret laughed, a cold, patronizing sound. "That lake drives our entire brand, Mr. Thompson. Millions every quarter. Your family needs to contribute like every other property owner." Her confidence unnerved me. She spoke like she had the law on her side, which made no sense if the lake was ours. "This is extortion." Her expression shifted slightly, and for the first time, she looked at me like I might be a real threat. "You should get a lawyer, Mr. Thompson," she said. "Land disputes can get complicated, especially when families haven't paid attention to local regulations for decades." Land disputes? I thought this was about lake fees. Her words stuck with me, a splinter I couldn't ignore. Was there something bigger going on? The harassment escalated after that meeting. The HOA cut off my father's electricity, claiming unpaid fees. They fined him $500 for obstructing the resort's lake view with trees that had stood for decades. Worst of all, they banned him from fishing in his lake, posting signs that declared it tourism property. Seeing those signs in person made my blood boil. My father, a man who'd never hurt a soul, was being treated like a trespasser on his land. When I called to check on him, his voice was heavy with defeat. "Maybe we should just pay something to make this go away, James," he said. "I'm too old for this fight." That broke my heart. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about ownership. I decided to dig deeper. I'd been operating on assumptions, believing we owned just the lake and a small plot. But I'd never seen the actual property records. So, I took a day off work and headed to the county land registry office. The clerk, a kind older man, seemed puzzled when I asked for records of our lake. "Just the lake?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. I didn't understand why he was questioning me, but his tone hinted at something I was missing. In the dusty filing cabinets, I found a 1985 survey, hand-drawn but clear. As I traced the boundary lines, my heart raced. Our property wasn't just the lake height stretched far beyond, covering 15 acres of prime waterfront land. I couldn't believe it. The survey revealed that our land extends under parts of the resort's marina, possibly including the hotel itself. My hands shook as I took photos of the documents. If this was accurate, the HOA wasn't just harassing us over fees, they were building a multi-million-dollar empire on our land. Driving home, Margaret's words about land disputes echoed in my head. Was she trying to cover something up? Did she know our property was bigger than we realized? The possibility sent a chill down my spine. We weren't just defending a lake. We might be reclaiming a fortune. I needed expert help. A friend recommended Daniel Harper, a retired property lawyer who'd worked in Crystal Pines back in the 1980s. When I met him at a coffee shop, I brought every document I'd found. Daniel listened quietly as I explained the situation, but when I mentioned the lake's location, his expression changed. He pulled out a binder filled with old surveys, maps, and letters from the original landowners. "James," he said, his voice grave, "your family doesn't just own the lake. You own 15 acres that the resort has built on. Half their hotel, the marina, the spates, all on your land." My mind reeled. "That's impossible," I stammered. "They must have bought it from us, right?" Daniel shook his head. "It looks like someone either ignored the boundaries or made a massive mistake during development. The resort started legally on adjacent land, but over the past 15 years, they expanded onto your property." He showed me aerial photos from the 1970s, when our land was untouched, to the 2000s, when the resort began encroaching. The evidence was undeniable. The HOA wasn't just bullying my father, they were profiting off our land without permission. Daniel estimated the resort made $10 million a year, with 60% of their facilities on our property. That meant we could claim millions in back rent, plus a share of their profits. "This isn't a fee dispute," he said. "This is one of the biggest cases of property encroachment I've ever seen." I left that meeting dizzy with the implications. 6 months ago, I thought we were fighting over a $700,000 invoice. Now, we might own half a resort empire. Finding a lawyer to take on the case was tough. Most shied away, citing the resort's deep pockets. But Sarah Bennett, a property rights attorney, saw the potential. After reviewing the documents, she confirmed Daniel's findings. "If these boundaries hold up in court," she said, "you're looking at tens of millions in damages, plus co-ownership of the resort." The numbers were staggering. $68 million in annual profits that should have been ours for 15 years. But Sarah warned me, they'll fight this with everything they've got. This could get ugly. The HOA's reaction to our lawsuit was swift and vicious. My father got calls from concerned neighbors and local officials, urging him to drop the case. Margaret called me personally, her voice tight with panic. "There's been a misunderstanding, James. Let's settle this reasonably." I told her we weren't interested in lake fees anymore. This was about who owned the land her hotel stood on. The silence on the line was deafening. The harassment intensified. A private investigator tailed my father, claiming to do property assessments. The HOA held emergency meetings with the city council, calling our lawsuit frivolous. I even got an anonymous call warning me to back off before someone gets hurt. I reported it to the police, but they could do little without specifics. Sarah saw it as a good sign. "They're scared," she said. They know they're in trouble. The turning point came when Margaret offered a $5 million settlement. That's not a small number, Sarah said. They're offering it because they know you could win more. I imagine my father's reaction to that kind of money. It would have floored him. But Sarah was firm. If they're offering $5 million, they owe you 10 times that. I agreed. This wasn't just about money. It was about justice after years of deception. The trial was a spectacle. Reporters, locals, and officials packed the courtroom. Sarah presented our case with precision, displaying the 1978 survey alongside aerial photos showing the resort's encroachment. The HOA's lawyers argued that their $50 million in legal construction and local approvals should override old surveys. But Sarah's question cut through their defense. Can you show proof that you purchased this land from the Thompsons? They couldn't. The knockout blow came from Emily, the HOA receptionist who'd always seemed sympathetic. She brought internal emails proving Margaret and the HOA board knew about the boundary issues years ago, but chose to hide them. One email from Margaret read, "We cannot let the Thompsons realize what they own. Keep them focused on the lake." The courtroom fell silent as Sarah read it aloud. Margaret's face went pale. She'd been caught. The judge's ruling was swift. Crystal Pines Resort has operated on land it does not own, he declared. He awarded us joint ownership of 60% of the resort hotel, marina, spa, and all, plus $50 million in back rent, the return of the $700,000 invoice, and all legal costs. Margaret faced criminal fraud charges for her deception, was later sentenced to 3 years in prison and hefty fines. The aftermath felt like a dream. We renamed the resort Thompson Lake Resort and worked with the existing staff to keep it running smoothly. My father, now in his final years, could fish in peace, knowing his land was worth millions. Tom became the new HOA president, and Emily was promoted to hotel manager. The no-fishing signs were torn down, and the dock felt like ours again. Looking back, it's wild to think a single invoice uncovered a truth that changed our lives. Margaret thought she could bully a retiree. Instead, she handed us an empire. Greed has a way of exposing buried truths, and in our case, it led to justice. What do you think about this story? Have you ever faced injustice or bullying in your life, whether from an HOA, a neighbor, or something else? How did you handle it? Did you fight back or let it go? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective on standing up to greed and unfairness. Let's get a real conversation going.